Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience. My name is Kenneth Hoffman and I am the museum's executive director. Tonight we celebrate the legacies of the Jewish Orphans Home of New Orleans, capping off our programming for the special exhibition, Most Fortunate Unfortunates. This exhibition opened in April last year and will be closing this Sunday, January 25th. MSJE has been delighted to work with our guest curator, Marlene Trestman, this past year to bring the stories of the Jewish Orphans Home to audiences here at the museum and across the country. That's y'all. Today, we'll hear from children and grandchildren of home residents, as well as the folks who are carrying out the legacy of the home today. I want to thank the MSJE team for their hard work these past 10 months on this wonderful exhibition, including our curator, Michael Jacobs, who's in the room. You can applaud for him. And Lizzie Meister, our program manager, who's put together all these fabulous programs. And I want to give a special thanks to our museum members for your ongoing support of MSJE and our mission. Cindy Smith is our membership manager. She's on the Zoom tonight. And so please feel free through the chat or after this program, if you want to send her an email, tell her how great the museum is, or have any questions about your membership, you can do that. I want to also highlight a few upcoming programs at MSJE. This Sunday, in addition to it being the last day to visit the special exhibition, we are also celebrating Hanukkah in our own Jewish way. From 1:30 to 2:30, kids and their families can join us to decorate their own mini challah king cake baked by the one and only Serena Bakes Bread. And for the 21 plus crowd, join us a week from today from 5:30 to 7:30 here at the museum for a king cake challah happy hour. And we all know what the happy stands for. Registration information can be found on our website at msje.org/events. And now I would like to introduce Marlene Trestman. Marlene Trestman is the author of Most Fortunate Unfortunates, the Jewish Orphans Home of New Orleans, and guest curator of our special exhibition of the same name. She is also the author of Fair Labor Lawyer, The Remarkable Life of New Deal Attorney and Supreme Court Advocate Bessie Margolin, who inspired Marlene to write about the orphanage in which Bessie was raised. In addition to prestigious research grants and accolades earned for her writing and for the exhibition, Marlene received a 2025 American Jewish Press Award for her article in B'nai B'rith magazine about American Jewish orphanages, and also served as a consultant about American Jewish orphanages for the team at PBS's Find Your Roots for an as yet unidentified celebrity to be featured in the upcoming season. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Marlene Trestman.
So I get my shoulder out of the picture.
Yeah.
From its opening in 1856 as the nation's first purpose-built Jewish orphanage, the Jewish Orphans Home sheltered and educated more than 1,600 children from 7 southern states. Although the 2 orphanage buildings are long gone, you can still see physical remnants. The 1886 cornerstone of the St. Charles Avenue building adorns the JCC today, and several iron gate posts remain at the site of the original orphanage at the corner of Jackson and Chippewa. But more important than these historic fragments, we're here tonight to learn about the home's living legacies, the institutional and the individual. We'll start with the home's 2 institutional legacies, the Jewish Children's Regional Service, JCRS, and the Newman School. I'm a proud alumna of both. When the orphanage closed, JCRS turned its attention to providing non-residential social services for Jewish children and their families. Let's welcome Executive Director Mark Rubin to talk about how JCRS carries on the home's crucial mission to this day.
Click to. If you want to click to advance the slide, or if you want to throw me the, I'll do it here.
Pretty good so far. Thank you all so much for having me here. Good. First, I'd like to thank Marlene for her commitment to our agency, to its legacy, for her labor of love, most fortunate unfortunates, and for guest curating. This amazing exhibit. And I'd also like to thank Kenneth Hoffman and his staff here at the museum for representing our story so well. As you are all well aware, our agency emerged after the closing of the home in 1946, and I am only the 4th executive director in its history. More amazing than that is that Marlene has known every executive director since that time in 1946. Stanford and Viola Weiss were the original directors, followed, and they did that for 40 years. Ned Goldberg succeeded them and did it for another 30 years. And I'm on my 12th year as staff of the JCRS, but 4 years in as executive director, and couldn't be more proud to lead this agency. While New Orleans is our home, JCRS service region encompasses 7 states that were part of the original B'nai B'rith District 7. And those are 7 Mid-South states, essentially everything from Texas up to Oklahoma and Tennessee, and down through the Gulf Coast, everything except Florida and Georgia, pretty much. And the story of the agency and the stories of Southern Jewish families has been woven together for more than 170 years. Stories coming out of Texas, like the Samuels family and Edgar Goldberg. Edgar Goldberg started in 1908 the first Jewish newsletter in Houston, Texas, and operated that, which is still in production today, as the Jewish Herald Voice. Joe Samuels actually purchased the Jewish Herald Voice later in the 1940s, I believe. So thereabouts. And his daughter, Vicki Samuels Levy, continues to operate the Jewish Herald Voice today. So 2 of the 3 owners of the Jewish Herald Voice were raised in the orphanage. There's so many stories of the legacy and families that came through the home that are chronicled in Marlene's book, from the Pulitzer brothers and the Wembley Tie Company to Rogers Perlis and David Perlis's legacy of Perlis's here in New Orleans, to Ralph Bierman, who you'll hear from his son Mark Bierman later tonight. But in reading about the history in Marlene's book, and what strikes me the most was that it was indeed a home. And what fills a home but families? And families come in all shapes and sizes, has its good and bad days, has its struggles and triumphs. But what the vast majority of children came through the door felt is part of a family, one that always tried to do its best to take care of their own, some of its founding mission. And that's what JCRS does today. We accomplish our mission through 3 core programs. But today, our mission is really to create a family that it provides a base of needs-based support, resources, services for Jewish youth that promote their welfare, education, and Jewish identity, helping them to become well-adjusted, self-supporting young adults. This continues today through our core programs, as I said, for camp, college, and special needs. This past summer, we sent 498 kids to Jewish summer camps, 61 different summer camps from coast to coast and Canada and Mexico. Camps like Green Family Camp in Texas and Camp Young Judea, Texas, as well as Henry S. Jacobs Camp in Mississippi, which members of this museum and has benefited from Macy Hart, who gathered the majority of the artifacts here in the museum and created the Institute of Southern Jewish Life. Macy's father and uncles were also raised in the home. Quite a legacy indeed. Jewish Summer Camp builds Jewish identity, independence, leadership, lifelong friendships, but camp is expensive, especially for families with multiple children camp age. And if you think camp is expensive, college is exponentially more financially challenging for many families. Our college aid program this year is helping over 120 Jewish students with generous scholarships and no interest loans. These students attend everything from state colleges and community colleges to yeshivas and Ivy League schools. This past year, we awarded over $500,000 to Jewish students to attend college. And our special needs program is probably the most impactful program that we have. It's the smallest program, but it really delivers the most impact, and it can be for any variety of special needs or learning differences and developmental challenges. Finally, we've also instituted Post-Katrina, a disaster relief program, as well as expanded that during COVID to essentially provide Jewish unemployment insurance during the pandemic. So as Nick Goldberg used to say, it only takes one divorce, death of a parent, loss of work, birth of a child with developmental challenges or physical handicap, flood, natural disaster, to be in the need of a program or service from JCRS. And today we still do our best to take care of our own. And to that end, I will say that part of our fundraising is our spring gala, with this year's theme of A Little Help from Our Friends. It's going to feature a Beatles tribute band, the Fab Four, on April 11th, 2026 at the Sheraton, and it's going to really be a fabulous event, raising needed dollars and vital dollars for our scholarship programs. So I thank you for that everybody has done here at the museum, especially Marlene, and her tremendous effort in this book. We couldn't be more proud to call her one of our success stories.
Driven by Rabbi Isaac Loish's determination and Isidore Newman's philanthropy, the home founded the Isidore Newman Manual Training School in 1903 to provide a superior academic and social education for its children. And foreshadowing today's best practices for helping disadvantaged youth succeed, the Homes Board situated the school outside the orphanage, where it still stands today, where home children learn side by side with Jewish and non-Jewish children, albeit then only white, whose parents could afford to pay the tuition. When the home closed, its board independently incorporated the school that it had run for more than 4 decades. Although head of school Dale Smith regrets he could not be here with you tonight, he has designated Jennifer Rosen, assistant head of Newman School for Enrollment Management, to speak here tonight. And I'll also note, in terms of ongoing legacies, she's married to a direct descendant of Rabbi Isaac Loish. Jennifer.
you want to click? Click one slide ahead. That one, yeah.
Which one?
To the right. Perfect.
Marlene Trustman has given our community an invaluable gift. An academic at heart, she brought both scholarly rigor and personal passion to uncovering the interconnected story of the Jewish Orphans Home of New Orleans and the founding of Isidore Newman Manual Training School. Her original research revealed connections that many of us, myself included, simply did not fully understand. The home served children who had experienced profound loss, children who, in Marlene's poignant phrase, were the most fortunate unfortunates. These were young people who had faced tragedy, but found themselves in a community committed to their welfare, education, and their future success. Isidore Newman himself extended the ideal of Kol Israel, which is rooted in the Jewish community's commitment to caring for its most vulnerable members. By establishing a manual training school, Mr. Newman offered the community a place where practical skills met academic learning, where young people could build both character and capability. Integral to this founding story is the leadership of Rabbi Isaac Leucht, a prominent spiritual community leader in New Orleans who saw education as one way to bring dignity and opportunity to the children of the home. His partnership with civic and philanthropic leaders, including Isidore Newman, helped establish the Manual Training School. Through Leucht's steadfast advocacy, as we've heard, Mr. Newman recognized that his investment was actually an extension of the home's mission, and Manual was designed to combine character formation, practical skill building, and academic learning. What strikes me most profoundly about Marlene's research is that it brings to light the alignment between the values of the home and those of Newman School. These are a commitment to individual growth, academic excellence, strong relationships, and high expectations, all within an inclusive community. These are not abstract ideals. They were lived realities in the home and have become part of Newman's mission statement. Today, when we walk through our campus, when we see our students engaged in rigorous academics, innovative projects, and meaningful service, we are witnessing the continuation of a mission that began over a century ago. The spirit of the home lives on in every classroom, where a teacher sees potential in a student, in every moment when our community rallies around a student in need, and every graduate who goes forth and makes a positive difference in the world. The fact that our entire faculty and staff engaged with Marlene's work this summer speaks to its profound relevance. Her research has become a mirror in which we can see our mission more clearly. And the visual timeline of Newman's history that her work inspired serves as a daily reminder of the traditions and values which continue to guide us. As we all look to the future, we are reminded that we are not just educators at Newman, we are the stewards of a legacy. We carry forward the vision of those who believed that education could transform lives, that every child deserves opportunity, and that a school community can be a place both of learning and belonging. We are indeed fortunate to be the inheritors of this legacy. And like those who came before us, we have the privilege as well as the responsibility of ensuring that future students may be as equally fortunate. Thank you, Marlene, for your scholarship, your passion, and your gift to our understanding.
We're going to take a moment now to bring up our panelists for the second part of our program, where you're going to hear from descendants of home alumni.
We're going to bring you back up for questions.
Everybody up, great. Rose Gilbert will start with you, if you'll pick up the microphone. We're going to hear first, and I just want to let you know, these are two of my favorite alumni family stories. There are a lot, and there are many that I had to choose from, but they are among my favorite, and they are intended to represent the different eras of the home and a number of different facets that I think will be obvious once we get started. I'm sorry here. Retired from a career in disability advocacy, Rose Gilbert is the great-great-granddaughter of Esther Carillion, who was in the home's care from 1855 to 1860. And she was the first registered child in the home. The home took care of her even before the doors opened. So, Rose, many children in the home reflect the dramatic journeys that immigrants travel to New Orleans and to this country. Can you tell a bit about Esther's father and mother and the circumstances of their coming to the home?
Sure. Most of my research has actually happened not too long after Marlene notified me and started talking to me about all this. But Esther is one of 7 children, and they were born anywhere from the Netherlands to the West Indies to New York to Jamaica and then to New Orleans. And so I reflected on that and thought, that's a lot of traveling, over 10, 15 years. Unfortunately, what I am not able to pin down is the loss of their mother. We're pretty sure that Benjamin, their father, passed away during the 1853 yellow fever epidemic, and he is shown on the 1850 census as being insane. And so sometime between 1851, when her last child was born, and 1854, when her father's will was read, we know that Rebecca passed, but we don't know how or where. So the only 2 children at this point I'm sorry, there were 4 children alive at this point. Miriam was the oldest, and then Aaron, their son, and then Esther and Rachel. The other children had already passed. As a matter of fact, I have a picture of a headstone in the Netherlands of one of the children. So there seems to lean to the effect that maybe she'd gone back over there.
But it's been wonderful what you have uncovered and what
Yes.
you've helped me uncover. Also, too, what's fascinating and represents the myriad family circumstances of the children is that Esther and Rachel's father was a very important rabbi in the Caribbean and introduced the ritual of confirmation in the northern hemisphere. So these are quite wonderful stories. Now, as your family's historian, Rose, and a New Orleanian, how has learning about Esther's and Rachel's time in the home affected you?
Well, it's kind of given me more of a personal attachment to the city, to my, when I first started in the 80s doing this research, the first time I came across Esther, she was listed as Mrs. Gilbert Guggenheim. And I had grown up knowing that, or hearing stories about our name change. And so I didn't understand why we had a Mrs. with both last names. And, so I was intrigued by this little lady who took both of the family names from her husband. As time goes on, and I met one of my great uncles, I found out that she was aware of her husband's connection to the Guggenheim family. And so she encouraged what that made, some of them to take the Guggenheim name. It made it a little difficult when I did my family research because I never knew which name to search for and where I was going to find somebody. But it's really impacted me because I feel more connected. I just feel more connected. I would have loved to have known that little lady in that bathing suit in 1928. I'm like, she looks like a real character. And of course, I always felt like my grandmother and grandfather were too. But it's just made me feel more connected to our community and our family.
Thank you both. Great. Hank is next. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm just not doing this well today, Rose. This is the list. Hank, you're up. Now, Hank Greenwald is a retired resident inspector for an engineering firm and a musician. Now, he's going to explain very briefly how he's the grandson of 5 home residents and has a large number, which we have only finalized the tally today, of the number of people he is related to who lived in the home. I'm going to let you just tell a little bit about this extraordinary trio here.
Sure. Hi, everybody. The number is 23. It involves 5 different families. All of the children in my families who were in the home were listed as half orphans, and that meant that either the mother or the father had passed away. In the case of the father passing away, there was no income. In the case of the mother passing away, there was no one to take care of the kids. So starting, I'd like to tell you how they became half orphans and keep it kind of short. The Leslie Greenwald, who I'm named after both grandfathers, was a businessman traveling and was staying at the Peabody Hotel when he passed away. And it had nothing to do with the ducks. It had to do with the gas heater in his room. So he became a half orphan. My grandfather Leslie had 4 brothers, and they went to Little Rock from Greenville, Mississippi, and moved to New Orleans. In the Jewish home, he met my grandmother Judith Korn, Korn, and they got together after they were both had left the home, and she had become a half orphan when her mother gave birth to the 9th child in 14 years. And they had come from Touro Infirmary, and the story I was told, first of all, was that she died of melancholia and was on her death certificate, but we found out later in time they started calling that baby blues, and today they call it postpartum depression. My grandmother and grandfathers, Hirsch and Seligman, don't know a lot about Hirsch. Family came from Lafayette. Seligman father had a very successful jewelry store on Gravier and Barone, which kind of went down the drain when his partner, was called to jury duty for the 11 Italians who were charged with killing the chief of police. Very, very famous story, lots of books about it, a movie starring Christopher Walken. If you can find that, it's really not a good movie, but it's about that story. So when Judith Korn passed away rather young, my father was just 2 years old, Leslie Greenwald went looking for another girl from the Jewish Children's Home, and that turned out to be Lily Newsberger, who had married a man named Dover, and she had 3 sons they got married, and those 3 sons became my father's stepbrothers. And that's pretty much it on that side of it. I'd like to tell you about the legacy that I enjoy today is the legacy and the gift of music. It started with the father of all these children. The father of the Korn children was Rabbi Jacob Korn, who became a graduate cantor in Germany, then moved to Breslau, where he became a rabbi and met his wife, who was a third cousin, but they married anyway, had 4 kids, went to London, had the 4th kid there, the 4th child, was born in London, and then they crossed the ocean and had another child a year later. So that gives me the exact date that they crossed the ocean of 1877.
Just so you know, Hank, I've got the photograph of the band.
Okay.
We can talk about the music.
Okay, so the music legacy started with the cantor. With the cantor, he passed that down to his children. The best of his children was Marcus Korn, who became a pretty famous local cornet player. He's pictured here with a baritone horn. And what's so wonderful, and what has so been wonderful about my life, is that Marcus Korn met my grandfather, Henry Hirsch, in this boys' band and became best friends for all of their lives. And in those days, the home would take the children to the Gulf Coast on the beach and picnics, and that led later in life to Marcus buying a home in Waveland, Mississippi. Now, since they were all friends and all sides of both families knew each other, I would be over there. This is up until I was 6 years old, and that was the way we spent our summers in Waveland, both my mother's family and my father's. So that was a wonderful childhood. Marcus Korn bought my father his first trumpet, which he went to LSU, got a master's degree in trumpet, was a virtuoso trumpet player, went and played first trumpet with the New Orleans Symphony, was a composer and arranger, and he passed the gift of music down to me, who played the clarinet because I met Pete Fountain, and my sister, who played flute. We all played at Fort J High School, and that's about it.
Thank you, Hank, and thanks for the photograph. Next up, we have Louis Fishman is a lawyer and former board member of both JCRS and Newman. He is the great-grandson of Abraham Yurutsky, whose registry page is shown up here. We didn't have a photograph of Abraham. And the grandson of Judge Louis Garrett, who also lived in the home, who married another woman who grew up in the home, Eva Levenberg Garrett. So, Louis, your great-grandfather and grandfather represent one of the multi-generational home families, alumni home families. In fact, you win the award. Hank wins for having the most family members who lived in the home, 23, and you win the award for having 3 generations in the home, and a spouse couple, both of whom lived in the home. Explain a little bit of the circumstances. Start and end wherever you'd like.
Well, thank you, Marlene. And as you say, my story is one of 3 generations. The first generation was Abraham Yurutsky. We know very little about Abraham. We know that his parents, in the home's records, you'll see that his parents were Louis Yurutsky and Pauline Yurutsky. Those names would reverberate through the generations. I am Louis. And we know that he was born in Natchez. That's the lengthiest way of spelling Natchez I've ever seen. Say Natchez. And we have other records that confirm that. He was born in Natchez in 1867. We don't really know the circumstances. We do know that somehow he showed up at the home in 1877. Now here's a 10-year-old from Natchez, Mississippi or somewhere who shows up at the home. We also know that he had an uncle in Pensacola and he had an uncle in Mobile, but those people had just recently come to America and had young children, and I suppose that's why this 10-year-old didn't stay with his uncle Isidore in Pensacola, and I'm not sure I know the name of the uncle in Mobile. So he was at the home. He ultimately married a New Orleans girl, and they had 2 children. One, Louis, my grandfather, and the other, my grandfather's sister, Pauline. The 3 generations are Abraham Yurutsky, Pauline, and Pauline's daughter, Tilly, who was placed in the home when Pauline's husband died, and Tilly was 5 years old. All that happened in 1921. We wonder, and I've attempted some research into Abraham and haven't gotten very far. Why does a 10-year-old travel? The home doesn't say who placed him there. It does say who picked him up. The uncle from Pensacola came and got him. It's just been a big mystery. I've asked people in Mississippi, have they ever heard of a family Yurutsky? I have toured with my wife Carla the municipal cemetery in Natchez, looking for a Yurutsky on what, forgive this expression, but it's what they call it. He's buried in a municipal cemetery in an area called Jew Hill, which I think is rather disrespectful, but that's what it's called. And that's my story. Now, Tilly's father died in 1921, and her mother, Pauline, placed her in the home at that time. In fact, except for Abraham Yurutsky, whose story we really don't know, all of the placements in the home for my family occurred because of the death of a parent, not both parents, but a parent. And Abraham's mother was the first to die in 1896. And his father died in 1899. So in 1899, he became he and Pauline became real orphans.
Thank you, Louis. I also want to point out, I think it's Louis's family also wins the award. This is in my book. Abraham Yurutsky was the founder of the Homes Auxiliary Association, the Alumni Association. In fact, it's a picture we saw on Hank Greenwald's family page. This was taken at around 1900 or so, a picture of the Alumni Association about 10 years after Louis's great-grandfather founded it, showing his gratitude to the home. And the point was to have an association that would support alumni who weren't faring as well. Part of the legacy in Louis's family is that Judge Garrett, Abraham's son, became the first alumni president of the Jewish Orphans Home, board president of the Jewish Orphans Home. So Louis, your great-grandfather was founding president of the Homes Alumni Association. Your grandfather was the first home alumnus to serve as president. In what ways do you think they left a legacy of leadership for you and your family?
Well, I obviously they did. Interestingly, with respect to my grandfather, first of all, my grandfather was the happiest, smartest, nicest, most uplifting person you can imagine. He had a number of Jewish friends, as one would expect, but he also had a great number of Catholic friends. And every year he went to the Catholic retreat at Manresa. He wrote a pamphlet called The Reflections of a Jew at a Catholic Retreat, which they used to sell at Manresa. I'm not sure whether it's still in publication.
I bought one on eBay.
There was this old rhyme about Boston. The Cabots speak to the lodges, and the lodges speak only to God. And my grandfather altered that for his pamphlet and talked about Manresa, the place of sacred sod where nobody speaks to anybody and everybody speaks to God. It was well received, and he got a lot of appreciation from that.
Louis, can you just end with the anecdote about what your grandfather said at the ceremony at his retirement for the presentation of his portrait? And we have the 1969 photo from the newspaper of that. Do you recall what he said? You were talking about his good humor.
I do. I was there. And the proceedings are published in the Southern Reporter, which is the collection of law cases for Louisiana. So you could read it there, but I don't recommend that. But my grandfather had been praised by any number of people. And at the end of the speeches, they took a portrait of him and they hung it in the courtroom, as numerous other judges' portraits were hung in the courtroom. And he said, well, I want to thank you all for saying a lot of nice things about me, but why is it that after doing that, you want to hang me in the courtroom? My grandfather, I used to walk downtown with him sometimes, and he knew everyone downtown because judges knew everybody. You know, downtown was a lot of lawyers, and they all knew the judge. And my grandfather would say to somebody approaching, I'd like you to meet my grandson, Louis Yarrett, and he would emphasize the Yarrett, which, by the way, had been changed from Yarutsky. This is my grandson, Louis Yarrett Fishman. Now, you tell him who you are, because if I told him, he wouldn't believe me. And I heard that about 1 million times. He was just a remarkable person.
Thank you, Louis. We're going to hear from Mark Bierman, president of Bierman Precision, Inc., past president of JCRS, and the son of Ralph Bierman, who lived in the home with his 5 siblings of 8, who came from Waco, West Texas, near Waco. So, like the vast majority of home children who were admitted from outside Louisiana, and the vast majority of children who were admitted with large groups of siblings, can you tell us about your father and his siblings' dramatic journey to the home from West Texas? Mark?
Sure. So my dad, his name was Raphael, but they called him Ralph. So it was he and 5 siblings. He told me the story of loading up in Waco, which is near West Texas, which is where the family lived, was West Texas. Anyway, they came to New Orleans. When they got here, they transferred to the streetcar. He'd never been in a train or a streetcar. When he got into the streetcar and he started driving up St. Charles, or riding up St. Charles, he said he and his siblings, especially the older ones, because they were very young, some were very young, some were older. My dad was 12. He said they saw these houses and they thought this was impossible, that people could live in a place like this. It looked fantastic to them. And so they rode the train, and the streetcar, got out of it and were brought to this very nice building, handed over to some very nice people who taught them what the rules of the institution were going to be and so on. But amongst the things that really struck him was after he learned the ropes, they brought him to his room, and on his bed were 5 changes of clothes. My dad had never worn new clothes in his life, not once. And he asked who they were for, and they said, those are yours, and you're expected to change clothes on a regular basis, which was not usual. And you're going to be doing washing, and you're going to have chores. So they told him a lot about what it was going to be like to live in a large family in his mind. To him, it was the new family. It changed his life completely. His life was hard scrabble. His dad literally was a peddler. His dad would go into Waco. He knew some Jewish dry goods dealers. They would wholesale product to my grandfather. He would go out with his wagon and horse out into the farms and sell products. Well, his wife died when my dad was 12 years old. She died, we think it was cancer. They said a blood disorder. And so my grandfather, who had 8 kids, could not take care of 8 kids and still somehow survive. So he brought 6 of them. The other 2 were too old. He brought 6 of them to New Orleans. Ironically, my Uncle Dave, who was one of the ones that was too old, he came to New Orleans and lived with a relative, but I understand he spent most of his days at the home. He loved the home. He just was there all the time, according to my dad. Might as well have been living in the home. So in any case, it was quite a journey for my dad. My dad said then he was introduced to school, which was Newman. They walked up the street to Newman School. He said that was also something he couldn't believe, because not only were they not getting much schooling where they were, but to see kids being dropped off by liveries, to see kids get out dressed in ways that he had not ever seen anyone dressed. And then he's like, what am I doing in this school? Well, that school, again, changed his life. He got an education that he would never have gotten in West Texas. Got introduced to people he would not have gotten introduced to in West Texas. And so for my dad, this was the best thing that could have ever happened to him and his siblings.
I'm going to end Mark's piece by showing you and letting you hear from Ralph himself.
What impressed me was that
Okay, it's not working. That's all right.
We'll send the clip out.
Yeah, I'll get it. As president of the company your grandfather founded in 1947 and a past president of JCRS, can you talk just a little bit, about a minute, of how his life in the home has affected you?
So when my dad was in the home, one of the things that he was lucky to be able to get involved in was wood shop. It was a mechanical training school, so they were teaching these kids trades. So my dad learned how to do some woodworking and so on. He realized he was pretty good at it. He went on to become a machinist. Then he went to World War II, came back and decided to open up a machine shop. Well, the legacy is that he thought he was going to be a machinist. He ended up being having a hydraulic repair shop, sort of by accident. And then he segued that into a lot of different areas of industrial tooling. And so had it not been for the introduction of Newman to teach him some of the skills he had, he would not have thought to start a business. And he even told me, he says, I knew nothing about running a business, but I was a pretty damn good machinist. And he thought, I'll learn the business side. And my dad, because of Newman, I think, was good at teaching himself. He said, I went to the library, got all kinds of books, and he started studying accounting and a lot of different management things. But without that, our family would not have had this root. And then I came into the business in the 1980s when I got out of college and have been, let's say, modestly successful at expanding the business and I feel very blessed that my dad had the experiences that he did and then turned that legacy over to the next generation. So we've been around for 75 years.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over in one moment for questions from you all and from our viewers online. But I want to welcome you to take a look at my website where there are now more than 400 home alumni featured in profiles. Wherever I have video clips that work, and audio, transcripts, photographs, all with permission of the families, I encourage you to take a look. There are wonderful stories. These are the tip of the iceberg. And I want to give my personal thanks to JCRS for my life, to Newman for my education, our panelists, alumni, and other descendants without whom my book, the website, and the museum exhibition would never have been possible. So Lizzie's going to field some questions from our Zoom friends, but I welcome you here in the audience to raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone and just, question and tell us who you'd like to have answer it, and feel free to include Jennifer Rosen and Mark Rubin as your recipients of questions.
The mics we have are these two, so let's pass this one around.
All right.
Any people in the audience have a question that they would like to get us started off with? Yes.
Marlene, why did the home ultimately close? Was it World War II? What ultimately caused the closing?
Several combining forces. The easiest way to explain it was the national trend, which had started at the beginning of the 20th century, toward foster care, removing children from large institutions and either keeping them within their own family with the advent of Social Security from the New Deal that made that possible, or having foster care where children were kept in more family, normal, the natural family arrangements. And that is how I came into knowing the JCRS. The home had closed when I was orphaned in 1968. I would have lived in the home had it still been around, but the JCRS oversaw my foster care and my brothers when we were in that situation. So those were the biggest influences.
We have one from the chat. How did you, Rose, follow where your family had traveled? This person is looking for their great-grandfather who came from Prussia. He was born in California, married great-grandmother in Maryland, and died in New Orleans, last name Marcus. She's wondering if he was in the home for a while in his childhood.
Well, oh, come on up, Rose. Okay. And I'll also, this is a perfect opportunity to plug the Chapman Family Research Center here at the museum, where you are welcome to contact folks to learn how to do this. I'm sure Rose will tell you some of the things she's learned, but you may just need to be digging into Ancestry or contact one of us separately. If you do have the name of the person you think was in the home, please send it to me and I can confirm or not whether that person lived in the home.
My experience mostly came from census records. And so the 1850 census showed me, they explained who the people are within the census, age, ethnicity, and then they'll say if they have a job or, whether they're a housekeeper. But it also said where they were born. And so that was the main thing for me to be able to figure out. And then in the midst of all the research that Marlene was doing, I had a young man, he was 22, over in Amsterdam doing research on the Carillion family. That was Esther's maiden name. And he dug up a world of information that my sister and I just got chills understanding that, I don't know if I had the right number of greats, but at least 4. Great-great-great-grandfather was a rabbi that was born in the Holy Land. And so it was impressive.
Yes, how is it that the records from the 1850s, 60s, 70s have been preserved? Do you think you have complete records of all the children who were enrolled into the home?
Thank you. Taking the second question first, no, we know we don't. In the 1980s, the home, then an iteration of the name, Jewish Children's Regional Service, looked to return the case files of children in the home who were extant, and where they could not be found to return the files, they were destroyed out of a very myopic fear of privacy concerns. But an extensive collection of records, including these beautiful registry books, are found here at the JCRS. The Tulane University acquired the 50 boxes of administrative records, and one of the most rich sources of information that it helps understand the registry pages happened to be sent by the JCRS to the American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati. And that's where I examined meeting by meeting anytime a child was mentioned, and where I also, for example, in the Carillion family, could find that when the grandfather in Amsterdam died, the home helped to get the inheritance to the girls in the home. So the records that were kept at the time were quite extensive when they were kept, and other times leave big holes. But the biggest hole was the lack of the case files, which would have told, probably clearly by the end of the 1800s, much more in-depth stories of the children.
From the chat, what was the percentage of single-parent children in the home versus those without a parent?
I can't give an exact number because we don't have every statistic for every child. but far and away, and this was the experience with Jewish orphanages across the country as well as orphanages of every religion, very few were full orphans. That was a small percentage. I would hazard less than a quarter and maybe even less than that. By and large, these were children with at least one living parent, and by the 20th century, this home, as well as orphanages across the country, took in children who simply had parents, alive or not, who couldn't care for them. So it was actually a very small number. And by the end of the home's term, like when my brother and I came along after the home closed, it's rare to have full orphans, largely because of increasing lowering of mortality of parent-age adults due to better safety and better wages. And so that was a really small percentage, far and beyond. What's also interesting is that even though it was often talked about the fatherless children who were in need of an orphanage, especially in the very early days, there was an equal split. As one of our discussants mentioned, it was the loss of either parent that could cause the family to be in turmoil. Either it was the breadwinner or it was the caregiver, especially where at that time men were totally dissuaded, if not by their own abilities, by family members, the local town, to give up children when they were the surviving parent and there was only one, instead of keeping the children themselves.
Not a question, Marlene, but generationally, the home and JCRS has been very important to members of my family. What I want to do is to thank you, because a phone call from you triggered all sorts of things. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this room when I say that the phone call from you triggered a path that I would never have followed, finding ancestors and relatives that I had never known about. And so a great deal of gratitude to you and to JCRS for everything you've done for, I'm sure, many of us in this room.
Thank you, Cliff. And I want to say, I have a selfish reason for reaching out to Cliff. The book begins with his ancestors in the home. Babette and her 5 children were inhabitants, maybe 3, 4, 5, and 6, around there. Again, in 1856, Babette Schwartz and her children entered the home, and at that time, widows also lived and could be cared for in the home. And thank you, Cliff, for all you've done to assist with this great research. That's a great place to end. Or we have another question?
We have some more questions, but we certainly are a little over time. How do we feel about 2 more questions, or should we end a good thing? Okay. Ask the questions. Okay, from the chat for Louis Fishman, how did the home contribute to your grandfather becoming such a distinguished judge? I'll bring this up to you so you don't have a hard go.
Thank you. I don't know the answer to that, except for the fact that he was educated at Newman School. My grandfather was very bright. He was an excellent judge, very highly regarded. He was as honest as can be. There's a story about a trial where someone had claimed that he had injured his arm, and the plaintiff's lawyer representing the injured person and the defense lawyer had been going back and forth, and my grandfather asked the 2 lawyers, "Do you mind if the bench asks a few questions?" And of course, lawyers would never say no to that because they'd be afraid that the judge would retaliate if they said no. So my grandfather asked the injured person, he said, and I'll pretend I'm the injured person, he said, "Now show me how high you can hold your arm, you can raise your arm," and struggled to get it about up to here. And my grandfather said, "Thank you." And he said, "Now, show me how high you could raise it before you were injured."
I can supplement Lewis's answer with only one anecdote provided by the judge himself. It was part of his campaign. he would mention the home proudly as part of his upbringing, because I think he knew that was a very sympathetic way to approach the crowd in New Orleans who knew about the home.
He was very proud of being an alumnus of the home.
That's right.
And he expressed that in 1955. 1955 was the 100th anniversary of the home. And my grandfather spoke, and I was then 14 years old, and he had typed out his remarks, and I was not at this event, but I had his typed remarks. And he expressed enormous pride in having been at the home. And he said that numerous people asked him, Judge, why do you tell everybody that you were raised in an orphanage? Don't you think that belittles you? And he said, of course it doesn't belittle me. I'm extremely proud of that. And he was. And that made me proud. And I've always been proud because my grandfather was proud. I was proud. And then I knew when I was at Newman that my grandfather had graduated. I knew that my mother had graduated. My mother's senior class ring fit me when I was in 6th grade, and I used to wear it. And it just was enormous pride in that legacy. Now, as to my grandfather becoming a lawyer, I really don't know. I don't know the answer to that. He had numerous friends who were lawyers and ultimately became judges, so perhaps it was just that, having friends who went to law school. He graduated from Newman in 1913. And I don't know how he did this, because I certainly didn't accomplish the same thing. I graduated from Newman in 59. I then graduated from Tulane Law School in 1965. He graduated from Newman in 1913 and Tulane Law School in 1916.
It was a combined. Wow. Thank you.
Remarkable man that he was. Thank you.
You want to wrap it up?
Yes. Thank you all for being here, both in person and online. It has been such a wonderful experience getting to share the story of the Jewish Orphans Home here at the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience.